Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted, and I do appreciate that immensely. I also love it when people leave comments, so if you have a suggestion for a video, a question about this one, want to tell me how you do things, or some constructive criticism is always helpful, so I appreciate all of those things. So leave a comment if you want to. Today I'm going to try something I haven't tried before. I've always seen a lot of interestingly carved cabochons that had some unusual edges. I bought a couple of black onyxes at the last show that were kind of scallop shaped and had kind of a carved top on them, and I think they're interesting looking. So I thought it'd be fun to try to set those in a bezel and see if I can actually do that. Having such an unusual edge on it. So we'll give that a try and see how it turns out. I'm going to make a ring out of them, and we'll do a little texturing on the band and try and come up with something sort of interesting, and we'll see how it turns out. Before we start, though, I wanted to thank some people. My patrons over on Patreon are my fantastic, wonderful group of core supporters. They've created this marvelous environment over there, and I really love it. And I do enjoy getting to know them over there and learning from them, and I hope they're learning from me as well. So thank you for that. Thank you for your financial support. All of that stuff makes this so that I can do this. Thank you. The other group is my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 16,600, I believe, which is unbelievable to me, and thank you for that. I do appreciate the really kind and heartfelt comments that I get from people telling me that I've helped them in some way. And that's really good to know, and that is my goal here. So thank you for letting me know that. It makes it easier to continue when I'm tired out or something. So I also really appreciate the super thanks and the buy me a coffees. Those really help with the cost of materials right now, so thanks for that. All right, let's get started on this project. Okay, this is one of my design idea books that I have on the merch store. Here's a new one that I just got. This one has a conversion chart on the back for fractions of an inch to decimals to millimeters. This new one has American wire gauge to inches to millimeters. So I think for people overseas that might be useful, since most people over there don't use gauges. But either way, those are available on the merch store. They have a great dot matrix inside to help you sketch out your designs. I find that helps me a lot when I'm coming up with stuff. You can keep a record of all of your stuff that you've made in the past, so you can recreate it if you want to, without having to refigure out how to do it. So here's today's piece. Like I said, I have two of these little black scallop black onyxes. And so they have kind of a bumpy edge, which I thought would be a little challenging to bezel set, but we'll give it a try. I did one prototype bezel, and it seems like it's going to work out okay. But it'll end up going down on either side of this, so it'll ride on top of the finger. I think it's going to look kind of, because of the scallopy nature of the stone, it's probably going to look a little Art Deco. I'm going to texture this inside here. And both of these are going to be made out of 12 gauge square wire. I'm just going to flatten out some of this and then hit it with my the edge of my chasing hammer, which is right here. I use this edge right there and kind of get a nice little pattern on it. This hasn't been pickled or anything, but I did a little prototype on it. So that's what it'll be like. Of course, much cleaned up. Here's the prototype bezel that I made, where it's got scallops on the edge. So we'll do that. This is a trick I haven't showed before, but a lot of people already know this one. That's why I haven't bothered to talk about it. But if you want to stick a stone in to see how it fits, and you're worried about getting it back out of there, if you use a little bit of dental floss, put it underneath it, in theory, you should be able to get it out of there. There we go. Okay. So one of the challenges on this particular bezel is these dip down pretty low, and the back side of it does not. And so we may need to do a little bit of shaping on the back of this bezel. I'm also going to use a little spacer in here to kind of raise the front edge a little bit on the scallop part, so that it sits a little bit like that in the bezel. So we'll use a little bit of tagboard under the front end there to get it to sit differently. Because if I did it just flat like that, even if I had some backing all the way across the bottom, you'd have to file down the front end of this bezel shorter than the back end, I think, just because of the nature of this stone. So we'll do some engineering on that one. I think to start with, though, let's make another one of these bezels. So for the bottom on these ones, I'm going to use 22 gauge sterling sheet. This, and for the actual bezel, I'm going to use 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip, and I'm going to use really thin stuff, 28 gauge, just because I want to be able to bend it nicely into those little nooks on the scallop piece. So let's start by doing that. I'm going to make a bezel that's relatively snug around there, and then I'm going to push it into those. And once I have it kind of shaped on the bottom, we'll solder that down to the sheet, and I think we should be good there. By the way, 3/16 inch is 4.76 millimeters. 28 gauge is how thick it is, and that's 0.33 millimeters. 22 gauge sheet is about 0.66 millimeters thick, and 12 gauge square is 2.01 millimeters, or basically 2 millimeters, I guess. Somebody told me the other day, we don't usually get that precise on the millimeters. So, if it's 2.01, we just call it 2, which is fine. I'm going to put the solder joint on the flat side over here because that's always a little bit easier. So I'll make a kind of a bend there. So I think if I get it relatively snug around there, and then add just about, I don't know, a millimeter extra where I'm going to cut it beyond where they meet, that should give us enough leeway to push those in a little bit. At least I hope. Seemed to work on the first one. If you're new to my channel, I use primarily hard silver sheet solder, and I use a liquid flux that I dribble on with a little dropper bottle. My torch is a Silversmith model, which is an acetylene air torch, so it draws in atmospheric oxygen to feed the flame instead of having an extra tank. So it's not quite as hot as an acetylene oxygen setup, or an oxyacetylene setup, I should say, which is fine because you don't need quite that much heat for silver most times. But it's significantly hotter than this mini butane torches or even the plumber's propane torches. So things happen quickly and nicely. Once you get one of these, you'll never want to go back to something else, in my opinion. Alright, so we'll flux it, then we'll put one of those little pieces of solder that I have there right on that solder joint. Didn't crust up quite as well as I'd like, so we added a little bit more. If you ever have problems getting stuff to solder, check to make sure you have enough flux on there. It should be kind of a white crusty coating generally. common cause when you're having problems getting your solder to do what you want it to do. Pretty good size-wise. Okay, so while it's upside down like this, sitting at the bottom, I'm going to dimple these in right there. That. 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 Make sure those are in there pretty snugly. And I'm not going to worry too much about the top of the bezel at this juncture. I'm going to go ahead and cut myself a piece of this 22 gauge sheet. Cut a few pieces of hard silver sheet solder here. And then we'll put a little flux in there, and then we'll line the inside with some solder. It's been a good year for my YouTube channel. It's grown a lot, and I really appreciate everybody taking the time to visit. So thank you for that. Oftentimes when you start something like that, it's hard to know whether it's going to do well or not. So I've met so many nice people through both my channel and my Patreon from all over the world, and it's really kind of fun. It's kind of weird to think of people all around the world watching the stuff that I make. And flattering. Quite a bit more mass in the sheet on this one than there is on the bezel, being thicker sheet and thinner bezel. So I'm really kind of trying to avoid the direct flame on the bezel too much and pump the heat into that bottom piece so that the solder starts sticking to that. I think we did it okay that time. We'll see. I think it's possible there's a little spot there that I missed, so I'm going to throw just a little bit more solder in there, and we'll see if we can't get it to really go all the way around. I think it's kind of neat that the technology exists now where when somebody, leaves a comment in a different language, I can use, online translator to figure out what they said and then to respond in their language. So that's really kind of neat. And if, my use of an online translator ever, if you ever get a weird response from me in your language, I apologize because those translators probably aren't perfect. Alright, so let's cut these off. I'm not actually a polyglot. I don't speak a million different languages. In fact, I never ever learned a full language. I learned a little bit of French and a little bit of Spanish, but not enough to speak in it, really. Which I kind of regret. It'd be nice to be able to speak a second language. Okay, so now I think what I'm going to do in order to make this nice and scalloped looking is I'm going to take a diamond burr with a little bulb on the end, and we'll grind that down a little bit. So let's go do that. So you can see that there's a little kind of a tapered diamond burr on there. Alright, so I'm going to go back to the other spot and I'm just going to file this down a bit. Alright, so now that I've filed it down a little bit, I'm going to kind of continue these little scallop shapes up higher using my round nose pliers. That'll be just fine once I go to set that, I think. So, get out of there. I'll do a little fine tuning with the shape at the top before we actually set the stone. Alright, so those will be going like that with a band between them. And I think with the band, we're going to have to kind of curve it upwards a little bit like that. So let's figure out what we're going to do next. So I decided to make this about a size 9, and here's the stuff that I ran through my rolling mill. It was originally this 12 gauge square, which is 2 millimeters roughly on the side, and I rolled it through the rolling mill until it was about 1.2 millimeters thick. So this will be the center part between these two for the band. But I wanted to texture it a little bit, so I'm going to do that now. So like I said, I'm going to use this edge here. I want kind of a rough looking sort of horizontal striations. I'm going to make sure I didn't get any bare spots where I missed. It's pretty good. I'm going to flatten it back out again. It curved a little while I was doing that. And then I'm going to file the edge so that it's nice and clean and smooth. Because I want a nice neat solder join between the three wires without a lot of it flowing up into this texture that I did. The hammering actually stretched it a little bit. That's not bad. So I'm going to go ahead and give this just a little bit of cleanup filing. I think that'll do. So I think the best way to do this to where we don't get a lot of flow up into the design is to set it on top of a few pieces of solder so that they will seep up into those seams. So let's put a few of them over there. Put these upside down, at least this one, so I don't get a lot of flux on the top. So there's a little bit of crusted up flux kind of blocking the way, but as we heat it, it'll kind of dissipate, and I can push those together a little bit. Theoretically. Give it a go. What I'm watching for is a little bit of shininess to start showing up on the top there in the seam. Well, let's cool that off and see how it looks. It's a little hard to tell until we get it cleaned up. So, but what I care about at this point is that I have a nice clean solder joint all the way up and down both of those edges, and I think I do. Check by doing this, probably. So I finished that up, and it looks like there's a good seam all the way down both lines there. So I think we're good. I'm going to file these ends flat. I snipped a little bit off that was sticking out. So let's get these flat. You can use your miter vise jig if you prefer on this kind of a thing. I guess let's round it out and see how close it becomes when we line up the ends. To get a cleaner seam, I usually when I'm doing something like this, put those ends straight towards each other. Now let's get them pushing together a little bit. Ideally, we'd like this to not be visible. Not sure why I'm speaking with a we pronoun. It's just me here. I'm certainly not royal. So I think we'll solder it from the back here, the inside, and we'll see how it goes. A little bit of solder left over here. This might make kind of a nice, just simple band. I kind of like the way it looks. Your bonus points if you know why I tipped that over and pointed the torch at the outside. Tell me in the comments if you know why. A little bit of precise filing, or I'll try to make it precise. Let's see. So I think we need to round this out a little bit, and then we can file it a little more precisely. Alright, I'm going to do a little bit of cleaning up on the edges. I'm going to do a little cleaning up with my rotary tool on the inside to make sure it looks nice and completely round. So I'll be right back. Alright, so I cleaned it up on the inside a little bit. It looks pretty good. I can still see where the solder seam is a little bit, but once it's polished up, I don't think that'll be too visible. So I think, though, I want to solder these straight across from each other, but I don't want this to be soldered all the way to the top of the bezel there. So I need to kind of position it so it's centered in there like that. And that's about how far we'll push them down into the pad. I went out and, I don't know if I said this or not, I just went out and resurfaced this on the driveway a little bit, this magnesia block, so I could have a flatter surface. Okay. That's a pretty level. I guess I didn't need to mark them. I needed to push them in far enough to where that's going to be flush with the inside of the band. Now I guess I'll make sure that we have them close together. I'll put a little extra on each side. thing about magnesia blocks is part of these pieces are buried in the block, which kind of insulates them. And so getting everything up to the soldering temperature is sometimes a little more challenging when you're using one of these. At least the parts that are buried in the magnesia block. So, but you keep that in mind when you're heating things. So you got to kind of figure in the mass of stuff, how insulated they are from the heat, you know, and try to get them all to get up to that soldering temperature at about the right time. We shall see if we did a good job or not, I guess. Those are positioned about where I wanted them to be. It's kind of a big ring, but hey, it's interesting. So let's let that pickle for a while. I like the texture in the middle. And we'll get those stones set after it's all polished up. So I'll be back. So I got everything polished up, and I set one of the stones here to see how it would go. And it went okay. I had to do a little bit of creative, since both of these stones were slightly different as far as depth. I had to do a little bit of playing with the filler. I use tag board, which is typically starts life as the back of a legal pad or something, but I'm going to go ahead and start doing the back of this with the flat side of my chain nose pliers. I recognize that I do this differently than some, and that's fine. I'm going to, up where these little creases are, I'm going to use the rounded part here. Kind of dimple it down like there. And try and make sure everything's pushed down tight against the top of the stone. Last stage is burnishing, where I'm rubbing with this top edge, right where they come together. All right, so now we got our little sort of scallop ring, sort of Art Deco-y to me, as I kind of expected it would look after with these kind of outward spraying kind of lines. So yeah, it's different. Kind of like it. That's what I was shooting for. All right, I'll get some better pictures and put them at the end. Okay, I'm not sure what we're going to call this one, whether a scallop ring or a cloud cabochon ring or something like that. Either way, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure to hit the like button before you go. And I would love it if you would take a moment and go check out my main channel page. I have it's probably close to 420 videos now. And at 3 per week, it goes up pretty rapidly. And I try to produce a lot of different content levels, like some beginners, some advanced, some intermediate kind of stuff. I also have a ton of different project videos. So if you're looking for some ideas for projects, or you just want to have some projects you can practice on, I have tons of stuff over there like that. So scroll back through my list or check out my playlist page. That's an easy way to kind of narrow down what you're looking for when you have that many videos. So, but I think there's something for sure that you'll find over there useful, so check it out. Come back and subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. There's no cost. And, you know, before you go also, if you want to check out some of the links I have in the description down below the video, I have a link to my merch store where you can get that ebook that I made for 2023. Incidentally, I am furiously working on getting the 2024's YouTube tutorial guide together, so that'll be available shortly after the beginning of the year. And but get yourself the 2023 one because it's a useful way to access a whole bunch of videos with some extra information about them. There's also a link to my merch store where you can get those design idea books. We're working on some cell phone cases right now, so you can look forward to those with some interesting designs on them, hopefully. And check out Patreon too. There's a link to Patreon if you want to find out more about that community. It's a really nice place over there. So, all right, well, thanks for coming. Take care. Happy silversmithing.